For decades, the West African nation of Togo, it was one of those quiet, cautious, politically neutral players on the world stage. But lately, something's changed. After years of near silence, Togo is making a huge geopolitical move. And get this, its first handshake isn't with its longtime partner in Paris, but with Moscow. So, we're going to break down exactly what's going on and why it really matters.
Okay, to really get how dramatic this shift is, you got to start with one number: 65. For 65 years, right, Togo and Russia technically had diplomatic relations. But here's the crazy part. In all that time, neither country had an embassy in the other's capital. It was basically a relationship that existed on paper and nothing more. And that really brings us to the core mystery here. After 6.5 decades of, silence, why now? Why this sudden urgency? Why are both nations deciding to open embassies at the very same time? The answer to that question, it tells us a whole lot about the changing map of power in Africa.
All right, let's dive into our first section, a 65-year silence breaks. To really understand this pivot, we have to look at what this move actually means. The simultaneous opening of embassies, that's way more than just a polite diplomatic gesture. It is a powerful, powerful signal.
Yeah, because embassies, they aren't just buildings, They're signals. And this signal, it's transmitting a message that the traditional powers, especially France, probably don't want to hear. It's a declaration, really, that new alliances are being forged out of pure necessity, not just ideology. It's sending a crystal clear message that Togo is choosing a brand new path.
Okay, on to Section 2, the border on fire. So what was the catalyst? What forced this change? Well, this pivot didn't just happen in a vacuum. It was a direct reaction to a violent, brutal crisis that absolutely shattered the country's long-held strategy of just staying quiet.
See, for decades, Togo's whole game plan was caution. They played this delicate balancing act, never getting too close to France, but never straying too far either. It was a strategy of quiet neutrality. And that entire strategy just collapsed the moment violence spilled over its northern border.
The reality on the ground simply forced their hand. You had jihadist cells starting to cross over from Burkina Faso, and all of a sudden, Togo found itself fighting a war it never even declared. Remote villages were being attacked, burned, and in just 1 year, more than 60 people were killed. The country's quiet neutrality was shattered by actual bloodshed.
Which brings us to Section 3. An old ally fails. So facing this brand new threat, Togo did exactly what you'd expect them to do. It looked to its traditional allies for help. Specifically, it looked to France. But the help they were hoping for, it never really came.
And this is where you can really see the disconnect. On paper, France had everything needed to help. We're talking troops, drones, military bases scattered all across the region. But from Togo's point of view, the reality on the ground was a complete failure to stop the violence. Instead of actual support, what they got felt like advice, conditions, and just plain indifference.
So for Togo's leaders, the message coming from their old partners felt painfully, brutally clear. No one is coming to save you. And look, if sovereignty means anything, it has to mean you're able to fight your own wars. This feeling, this sense of being abandoned, it created a massive security vacuum.
Let's move to Section 4, Moscow's pragmatic pitch. And that vacuum? That's exactly where Russia entered the picture. Moscow stepped right into the void left by the West, and they didn't come with lectures. They came with a very different and very pragmatic offer.
So let's just compare the two pitches side by side. The West's offer, it often came with a lot of conditions, a lot of conversations about democracy. Russia's offer was way simpler: tools, training, weapons, and intelligence. And here's the crucial part. It came with zero strings attached. No questions asked about how Togo governs itself. For a country that's literally under fire, the choice probably seemed pretty clear.
And this line, this really captures the entire essence of Russia's message. It was a message of empowerment, of sovereignty. It was basically telling these leaders, hey, you don't owe loyalty to powers that abandoned you, and you sure as heck don't need anyone's permission to defend your own people.
All right, Section 5, a new Sahel alliance. Now, this is super important to understand. Togo's pivot isn't happening in isolation, not at all. It's part of a much bigger regional awakening, a fundamental realignment of power happening all across West Africa. This whole realignment is being spearheaded by a brand new bloc, the Alliance of Sahel States, or AES for short. It's made up of Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. And their core idea, their doctrine,
is all about African self-defense. They're not fighting for territory, they're fighting for stability and sheer survival. And they're doing it completely independent of any former colonial powers.
And you can really see how this idea has just spread like wildfire. It's a domino effect, right? But not a domino effect of coups, but of choices. It all started with Mali defying France. Then it flowed into Burkina Faso and Niger. And now, that very same logic is echoing in Togo, as it starts to coordinate with its northern neighbors.
Okay, our final section, number 6. The map is redrawing. So, what does all this mean for the future? Well, it looks like the old geopolitical map of Africa, the one that was largely drawn up in European capitals, it seems to be fading. A new one is being drawn, and this time it's being drawn by African nations themselves.
And a really great way to see this split in real time is to just compare Togo with its neighbor Benin. They've chosen completely opposite paths. Benin is building walls. It's reinforcing its borders and partnering up with France and NATO. Togo, on the other hand, is building bridges, coordinating with the AES and with Russia. It's a fundamental split in strategy. Benin is basically betting that survival requires sticking with the old order. Togo is betting that survival now demands you stand up and assert yourself.
And listen, Togo is not alone in making this bet, not by a long shot. Russia's influence is expanding, and fast, across the continent. More than 20 African nations now have defense cooperation agreements with Moscow. This isn't just a coincidence, this is momentum. What we might be witnessing here is the slow replacement of the old security architecture with a brand new multipolar one.
And it all comes back to this incredibly powerful idea that's spreading across the continent. This might just be the Africa the West didn't see coming, an Africa that believes true sovereignty isn't something that's just handed to you, it's something you have to take.
So here's a final thought to leave you with. Some observers in the West look at this trend and they call it radicalism or militarization. But for many of the leaders on the actual front lines, they just call it survival. And it leaves us with a really critical question as we watch this continent transform right before our eyes. What does sovereignty really sound like?